Slick Talkers. Welcome back to another episode. And I just told my guest today, Doug Truitt, who is the head of commercial at Romy. I just told him this is the episode I've been looking forward to probably the most. No offense to everyone else who's just been on the show this last month, because we're going to geek out. This is going to get real nerdy. We're going to get technical, probably a little philosophical in the sense of hospitality and the distribution landscape. But Doug, welcome to Slick Talk. How are you doing, my friend?
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. I'm doing great. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about in general, just because I love geeking out about it. So I'm excited. I'm pumped.
Me too. It's early. We got that early morning energy, a little bit of coffee for all the people out there that enjoy the show while they listen, or have a cup of coffee, not while they listen. But anyways, Doug, let's start kind of with your career before we jump into the fun, geeky topics that we're going to get into. You basically have had your whole entire career in hospitality, from what I got to see on your LinkedIn. So from working at a racket club to now being the head of commercial at Romy, the probably biggest urban operator in the United States, at least compared to Sonder and maybe a couple other little players that we may or may not have had on the show before. But anyways, you've had a quite extensive career. So walk me through kind of your upbringing in hospitality and short-term rentals and hotels.
Yeah. So I think, I started my career in hospitality in Monterey, California. I grew up in Merced, California, which is I was an Air Force brat. My dad was in the Air Force. And I was over in Monterey. I was playing tennis, getting ready for college. And my tennis coach at the time had a friend who worked in banquets. I was a sales and catering manager at an Embassy Suites there. He was like, "Hey, you want to make some extra cash?" And I was like, "Sure." I went and waited some tables during big banquets and stuff, and started falling in love with the extra cash while I was also teaching tennis a little bit. And then decided I went to go to school for it. So I went to Monterey Peninsula College, got two AS degrees there for hospitality restaurant operations. And I worked for everything from, room service supervisors, housekeeping managers, front of the house, front desk, night auditor, assistant general manager, did a bunch of stuff. And I think, I've worked for everything from Pebble Beach Resorts to Disneyland to Coeur d'Alene Resort to Red Lion Hotels. And I think, the thing for me that always, I geeked out about as a kid was in my young years was seeing GMs talk about, I started off as a bellman and became a general manager and worked my way up and worked my way up, and always aspired for that because I thought there was something in it for people who had the grit to push through everything and get through it. And no harm to anybody out there who's gotten degrees and gone that route and done it that way as well. But that experience in hospitality, that kind of grow up in it and figure it out was always something pretty cool. So that's kind of where it all started, I guess. And vacation rentals started from my really, really good close friend, John DeRelay at Wheelhouse. He reached out to me when I was at Red Lion and cold called me and was like, "Hey, I'd like to talk to you about opportunity to maybe consult on some revenue management stuff with this company, Stay Alfred, blah, blah, blah." And I thought it was a timeshare pitch. I swear to God. And so anyways, so that spun my leap into vacation rentals and had that Stay Alfred experience, which was amazing. Great relationships, great friends, and then really blossomed. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
I love it. And you and I got to connect a little bit on a personal level because I got my career started in Spokane. You live in Spokane. We got to geek out about the properties, the Davenport Grand, the Davenport Historic Hotels, the Worthy family a little bit. And so it's cool to see, for anyone that lives in Washington listening to this show, you would understand it's a rarity, right? Not a lot of people, if they do say Spokane, they call it Spokane. Or a lot of people, if you're in Washington, it's Spokampton. So it's
Spokampton.
It's got so it's got a good history, but it's great hospitality scene, and I'm so thankful for that time of my life where that was kind of where I got everything started for me. For you mentioned a couple different places. So were you remote, or did you kind of move into different locations for some of these old jobs back in the day? Like, kind of walk me through that, because I know you're in
Yeah,
Spokane
I did.
now.
Yeah, most of my time was definitely spent in Monterey. Worked at Embassy Suites, Monterey Plaza Hotel and Spa, Pebble Beach. Bounced around a bunch there, and then I went down to LA for like a 6 or 8 month stint. Was going to continue some college down there at Mount San Antonio College, and I got a job at Disney, working at the Grand California Hotel in their fine dining restaurant called Napa Rose, and got some experience there with the Disney cast whole thing, which was kind of cool. Ruined the magic for me as a kid, but it always does for people who work there. But then I moved up to Spokane because my sister was here with my brother-in-law, and they were having kids, and I was like, I had two choices. I could either go to Vegas, where I had a buddy who was from Le Cordon Bleu Culinary Institute, and was getting a job at I think Mandalay Bay, and the Wynn Hotel was about to open, and was putting in applications and stuff there right out of getting out of college and being done with my degrees. And I was like, either Vegas or I go to Spokane. And the Coeur d'Alene Resort had recruited me to be their assistant housekeeping executive housekeeper. And so I took the Coeur d'Alene route because I want to be near my sister and family. And then kind of blossomed from there. The racket club part, I I've had some friends. I'm a 4-5 USTA player. So I played a little college tennis at Whitworth way back in the day. But had the president of the board for that nonprofit was like, hey, would you want to become the general manager of this racket club? And I was like, sure. Pay plus free tennis. I get to play with the Zags and do all that stuff. I was like, yeah, let's do it. So that was a fun little stint. But that's how I got stuck. And then I met my wife and rooted down. And I just love Spokane. We have 3 kids here, and it's a great community, great place to raise a family. And at the time, it was very, very inexpensive. Still is pretty inexpensive to live here. So,
yeah, I was going to say, my buddy and I, this is a total side tangent, but we found this property for sale when we were living near Gonzaga. And, I think I told you this, but I was going to Moody Bible Institute, and I dropped out within like 3 months because what my parents wanted me to do. I didn't want to do that. And, long story short, we found this place. I forgot Wabash Way. Wabash. Yeah. So we found a property there, and it was like a brand new renovated home. It was kind of an unfinished basement, but still really like brand new piping, brand new wiring, all this stuff. Like it was the guy just killed it, and he was selling it for $165. And we were like, oh, we're in. We're like, we're doing it. Unfortunately, as college students don't have the best credit. I was an idiot that also bought a new cell phone, and obviously they do a credit check when you do a payment plan and stuff. So I was 3 points just under the line of getting it. So I may have been living in Spokane, during the time of this recording, if only that went through. So,
that's interesting.
Live and learn. But it was a beautiful property. I hope it's still there and they found a good owner. But anyways, I love Spokane. Coeur d'Alene is not a bad place to end up either for a management job. So for any listeners, look up Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. It was like maybe a 40 to 50 minute ride from Spokane 45. Valley, maybe, if you want to get a little out there, get on the outskirts. But it's such a beautiful location. And so you got a call from John Day Relay. Love John. Shout out to Wheelhouse and the whole team there. Love the product. Love the everything. Wheelhouse is just great. You get a call from John. He's like, hey, you want to do a consulting thing for this company called Stay Alfred, which I don't blame you, because when I was a hotel manager, this is all kind of coming full circle. I started the podcast in 2018. I heard about this company called Stay Alfred right after I left Spokane. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. Like I saw the vision. I was like, this is the best thing of hotels and all the good stuff in one building. And so I became a big raving fan. Tell me about that time with Stay Alfred from what you can share. And then obviously I still want to geek out and get into the distribution stuff and stuff. But I love the backstory.
Yeah, no, you started to hit the coined phrase we had at Stay Alfred, which is best of hotels, best of vacation rentals, but none of their flaws.
Amen.
And that was one of the big things that really attracted me. Jordan Allen and John, like I told the guys, as a hotelier, like I was like, hey, I can come meet with you guys, but I got to be honest, like I'm not off until like 7, 8 o'clock, until after like major check-ins are done and all the dinner rush is done and the hotel's in a good spot. Cause I was number 2 for the hotel at that time. So I was like looking after everything after the big boss went home. And
Yeah.
so I went and met with them.
The most fun.
No, especially with a young family.
Yeah.
But John and Jordan, they like stayed late. I met with them at like 7 o'clock at night and just got to hear them. And I was like, no, this, it was scary. It was like taking a leap at first leap into like a real startup. And it was a little nerve wracking for my wife and I, but I mean, I can't tell you enough, like out of my entire career, like doing that leap was probably the best thing I could ever do for me, on a growth perspective. I mean, we started at Stay Alfred. When I started the company, we had 150 units in 10 markets. And for those of you who don't know, Stay Alfred was basically like Romy, apartments and multi-unit logic style distribution, like hotel-like distribution, where you got, a bunch of apartments in a building, different room types, but you nest them under one room type, to distribute. And we were 150, 10 markets when I started. And then 4.5 years later, when the company inevitably shut down due to COVID, we were at 3,000 apartments in 20 or 30, 32 markets, I think it was.
Yeah. A lot.
And it was amazing, rapid scale, rapid growth. I went there, I started the revenue management department, actually giving time and attention to, ADR, RevPAR, occupancy, and all the rate planning and acquisition and expansion. And it was very enlightening and very cool because coming from the hotel world, you sit in a box and you are told this is the spreadsheets you use. These are the budgeting systems. These are the PMSs. These are all the things that you get to use. And there is no real freedom to like change those things or change up major fundamental structures and whatnot. And so when John will probably laugh at this, but my first like 6 months at Stay Alfred was like me like asking for permission on everything. It was like, okay, can I go ahead and change this? Could I do this? And they were just like, the common thing from Jordan Allen was always like, dude, do your thing. Like, do your thing. And it became a deal there. And John always laughed at me. He's like, I don't know what the problem is. Just do it. Whatever. Who cares? Like, and so it was a very foreign concept.
It's so different from the hotel world where it's literally you have to beg for permission sometimes. It was not. If you change one rate for a guest room, people would be like, why'd you discount them 25%? That's a pretty steep discount. Why would you do that? Why are you giving out drink vouchers? What the heck? And you're like, oh, just doing my job. Calm down.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
yeah. No, so I mean, it was great. It was very enlightening. About 6 months into the revenue management piece, we did some shuffling around and realized that distribution needed time and attention dedicated to it. And I think that was Stay Alfred's inflection point at that point where, there was an issue with distribution and realizing, hey, we've got this thing that's sitting in marketing or it's sitting in whoever's realm and we're not giving it the time and attention. And the reality birthed for me that was like, look, it doesn't matter if you set your rates at $100 or $500. If it's not seen, your strategy isn't going to work and you're not going to get anything. And so we made the decision to have me start up another department in Stay Alfred called distribution and started that up. And then we blossomed that thing into a department of 3 sub-departments that centered around OTA support. So monitoring reservations, credit card fraud, transactions, reconciliations, ghost reservations, integrations that happen between the platforms. And then distribution formally, which was like the maintaining of the strategy and optimization of the listings, as well as creating the new listings and onboarding. And then also the review and reputation management, which was replying and responding to reviews, doing outreach, trying to get new reviews, using influencers and friends and family and things like that, trying to do stuff there. So, but yeah, that was my experiences kind of up until the Stay Alfred days ended. And then after that, I took some time, did some consulting during the COVID stuff. I actually helped wind down the company at Reynolds United. I was at Stay Alfred, I was one of 4 people left, which was heartbreaking because we built up such an amazing thing. and had to tear it down. But it was also rewarding at the end to know where the things can go. And learn how to use that. But yeah, I did some consulting, and then I went to Rentals United and created a product there called RU Data Studio, or now it's called Elevate. But was the head of revenue success there, and worked with the first time the software and distribution side of integrations and the tech there with the team. Those guys are amazing. And then moved over to Evolve after that, and now I'm at Romy. So yeah,
I love it. It's quite the chain, but it all makes sense, and I think it all kind of connects together in a pretty beautiful way, in the sense of you've had this specialized niche that, I think you and I were talking about before the actual recording on our pre-chat going into, it's very funny how a lot of companies in our industry, from the traditional vacation rental side or even the STR side, whatever definition people want to give this industry or this category of hospitality, but it's not a lot of companies have a CTO or anyone that's a head of product on the management play. Obviously, all the SaaS companies have a CTO, head of product, or some kind of specialized positions, right, within the internal company structure. But property management companies don't. Rarely, it's usually a CEO, a head of ops, a COO, maybe a head of finance. And you're running, right? Like boots on the ground. I want to talk about this beautiful marriage and relationship between product and distribution, and kind of the outlook that you have on it. Because I'm becoming a little bit more obsessed with product and looking at the homes, and for our company, at least hotels, as product now. And now when it comes to product, you have to think about, how do I distribute this product outside of Airbnb and Vrbo and the main channels? Like how do you kind of look at this marriage between the product and distribution within this industry, whether it's a hotel or an STR?
Yeah, I mean, I think of product versus distribution as like, it kind of goes back to what I said with the Stay Alfred piece of birthing, a distribution department, which is like, it doesn't matter what you set your rates at. Like you're not gonna get to that unless you actually, have great impression and you have great eyeballs and you have actually people seeing what it is. So like taking a product and pricing it, or even in the leading up to it, and actually trying to do like the underwriting and the pro formas to say like, is this thing going to pencil? Is this going to do whatever? It's all circumstantial, based on your strategy of how you build your business and decide to take that product and launch it out there on the stage of all the eyeballs of potential demand and travelers to see it. And it's really interesting too, to me, like, and I've talked about this a lot at different panels and conferences, but it really comes back to like, who owns it? Who owns distribution? Who owns that nature of creating the listings, managing the relationships with the OTAs and the reps, if you can get your reps, and who is actually like making sure that thing's live and bookable, it's always on, it's doing what it's doing, and whatnot. And that's where like a lot of places I've heard be like, oh, well, that sits in marketing because it's the shiny, fun design things. I get the photos, I get the content description, the wordplay, that kind of stuff, the SEO. But then it's like revenue management's like, well, yeah, but I set my rate plans, and if I'm on one channel versus 5 channels, that's a different rate strategy that I'm going to do to actually capitalize on the maximum amount of RevPAR that I can get for the property. So it's like there's this weird void where it's like you have to have distribution for both the revenue arm, the marketing arm, and even a lot of components of like the operational arm of the business too, for what's accurately being displayed, what the reviews are coming into, how to make adjustments and things, and to investigate. So I definitely think there is a broken piece in our VR space, which is, and I don't know if I should say broken or if I should just say neglect. I think that people neglect the importance of distribution as far as dedicating positions and roles specifically for it, and where it sits within the organization. And that's really what I firmly believe. And I think that's a tough spot that a lot of folks get into and they neglect.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, you've been at the ground floor of a couple startups now within the space, from Stay Alfred and Romy. Even though Romy, they've been around a little longer. I still consider them a startup, right? Like they're raising capital, or they raised capital on that last round. Brandy, COO, good friend of Good Morning Hospitality, obviously as a host there. So like, kind of still, I would consider, let's say, startup.
Yeah.
You see how fast startups move, whether they're funded, private equity funded, or bootstrapped. Like we move quick. And would you say that's a reason of neglect for this role and position on distribution? Or do you think it's just not really considered and we have a lot of generalists rather than specialists?
Wow, that's really good. I think it's a bit of both. I think it's probably more heavily on the nature of the startup aspect. It's at least for me, it feels like from my experience going from hotels to startups, like in the startup side of things, it's like you flip a light switch, but there isn't a whole lot of like going back to make sure, well, was that light switch wired appropriately, right?
Yeah.
Was the ground there, the neutral there, and was the hot wire on the right terminals and that kind of thing. There isn't a whole lot of that go back. It's like check boxes in a lot of ways for a lot of folks. It's like, I got to get this thing done, get it up, get it live, get it bookable, get it out there, and then I'm on to the next thing. And it's like, how do you throttle that? And that does tend to be a pain point for me with some companies in a lot of ways, that I both have consulted for as well as work full time for, which is like, hey, I appreciate it. We want to move on to the next thing. We want to add this next channel, add this next thing. But it's also like, sometimes you got to slow down a little bit, make sure that what we just did is optimized and doing what it needs to be. And I find myself like in a place right now, currently where it's like prioritizing and organizing things in a way that's like, okay, we can do these things to go really, really fast. And then we need to set on the calendar, let's in 2 months when things could potentially slow down, we need to come back and revisit these pieces, because these pieces may not be the main MVP, but they also are ancillary additional things that we can use to our strategy. I would say that there is a specialist aspect to it too, that might be tied to the nature of the startup area, where it's like, in the past, maybe it's been like, hey, get this thing live and bookable. A revenue specialist or revenue manager takes it, or a marketing person takes it, gets it live and bookable and sets it, forgets it. And it doesn't actually create an avenue for people to be like, I'm specialized in distribution and integrations and that kind of thing. Go search on LinkedIn or any other stuff and try to find a job that says distribution manager. And you'll probably get stuff related to like A to Z rentals or United Rentals, or, something in the manufacturing area, or, logistics for like moving trucking and stuff around. But you won't get it for like channel management, vacation rental integrations or advertising, that kind of thing. So it's a very interesting dilemma that I think is tied on both sides of what you were asking about.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we definitely, Steve Trover would love this conversation, because it's always about putting, the right people in the right seat, right? And I think sometimes, from business owners and entrepreneurship in general, like there's no playbook for short-term rentals or vacation rentals, right? Like there's maybe a playbook for hotels, but that's even changing today. So there's no playbook on how to set up the best property management company, destination management, like whatever, right? Like we're all just kind of pulling what we know from business in general. There's a CEO, there's a COO, there's a head of this, there's blah, blah, blah. And then you have the boots on the ground, or the operators, right? Like the people turning over the units, the people doing inspections, right? Like that is kind of the just structure that we've kind of adopted. I would love to see, like, do you think, especially from a revenue management standpoint, can a revenue manager easily and quickly become a specialized expert in distribution? Or do you think there's an extra piece from the role that they really have to learn and adapt and understand better than just setting rates for specific channels and seasonality?
Yeah. One thing before I answer that I was going to mention too is that there's a vastly different approach and strategy between hotels and vacation rentals when it comes to OTAs. Hotels use OTAs almost as a last-ditch effort from a booking window standpoint. Yes, they're going to be live and bookable on the OTAs, but they will actually restrict inventory and hold things back a little bit more. And they actually have different agreements than the vacation rentals do with the OTAs, with the big four, or at least the big two, Expedia and Booking.
Yeah.
And that stems from a nature of like, their direct is powerful, their franchise. They have, how many years of hotel experience and data and everything else to hone that in, so that usually revenue managers or the people on the channel management side of things in the hotels are like, we're ditching inventory in the last like 2 weeks before the arrival date, rather than, a strategy of trying to get as much on there. And vacation rentals is the opposite. As far as revenue specialist or revenue manager being able to take on that trade of distribution, I think it's definitely possible. It depends on portfolio size. It depends on the responsibility that's being laid upon the revenue manager. Because let's be honest, the revenue manager is looking at the rates for every day, for every available day that's out there, for that property, for that market, for that room type. And trying to actually be very analytical about pickup and actually understanding, am I getting what I intended to get? And trying to live in that philosophy of like selling the right product to the right customer at the right time for the right price. I always modify that statement to say on the right channel is too, because there is part of that needs to be in there. Can they learn it? Absolutely. Totally can, because they understand one of the basic core foundations of integrations to channels, which is rates and availability. The other pieces are content, cancellation policies, minimum length of stay restrictions, minimum advance purchase restrictions, photo quality, property quality score, those kinds of things. They can definitely learn it. It's just a matter of bandwidth and how it can do. I don't believe, in my opinion, for anybody who is, outside of that, 10 unit, 50 unit count, that it makes sense to try to just double it up on a revenue manager to do it. Unless you're going to give a little bit of padding and say, hey, you know what, revenue manager, normally if you were just doing revenue management, we'd give you this amount of your portfolio or to manage. But if you're going to do distribution too, then it's like, you got to give another like 25% of padding of time to actually, do it, optimize it, think about it, try to have strategies.
Yeah, no, I love that. And this is the fun part for me, because when we were talking, I'm totally a fan of being able to change your mind. I think it's a big flaw in humans when we don't change our mind and we get very stubborn. So I will say I can play both roles. I can play stubborn and I can play I'm open to changing my mind. I've made some pretty bold and bullish statements on this podcast and on Good Morning Hospitality with Brandy. And I know she feels the same sentiment, where I've always said, I hate channel managers. I think they're the scum of the earth, in the sense of they are just middlemen between middlemen, and they're just nickel and dime. Like, it's just another nickel and dime between guest and owner, where the money exchanges, hands multiple times. Now, I had Andrew Kitchell on the show just before this episode went out, and we talked about the tech landscape, and he was able to change my mind on the opinion of guidebooks, right? Like, I thought, guidebooks, oversaturated market, really not that important of a technology tool. Yes, it's great to have one source of truth for your guests, but at the end of the day, it's nothing special. No one's mastered it yet. And he changed my mind on that on the episode. And during our pre-chat, you actually changed my mind on channel managers and the way I look at connections between the OTAs and the relationship that PMSs have with, Airbnb, Booking, Expedia, and other niche channels. My original opinion was that the PMS should absorb that role. There doesn't need to be a channel manager. And you kind of actually shifted my mind on it, especially as I've stepped into a product role with our management company. So I'm very curious. Can you walk me through the channel manager importance and kind of how this API relationship kind of works, especially when you're looking at distribution strategy and growth and marketing maximizing your revenue and profitability per listing, getting to that right time, right guest, right place, right channel, right price, all the good stuff. So I would love to know. So the way the guests can know, or not the guests, so the listeners can know I was wrong and I've changed my mind. So I would love to have you geek out on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, number one, I'm honored that I was able to change your mind. I will say one thing that I tell my teams a lot of time. Stubbornness is a good thing if it's in the right place. Because stubbornness is what, specifically in distribution, breaks down the walls of everybody wanting to point the blame at somebody else's code or whatever. If you are stubborn and you persevere and you beat your head through the wall 1,000 times, you're going to learn stuff along the way, but you also will gain valuable experience at working with people to say, you know what, I get that that's the way you thought it should be and it's always going to be, but it's not. And let's figure out how to do it. In terms of channel managers, And this might tie back to a little bit of the neglect in the space
Yeah.
for the distribution, appreciation for distribution in its contribution to like revenue management strategies and marketing strategies. But when you think about channel management, it's probably easier to say, oh, you're just the middle guy that's trying to connect in to get a piece of the pie, et cetera. But the reality is, go try to build an integration to Booking.com or Airbnb or Expedia and see how complex that is. Even if you're not tech savvy at all, just go look at what, maybe try to figure out if there's requirements you can understand. If you had to build a connection yourself, what kind of things have to happen? Going back to the days way back when it was like Vrbo only synced rates and availability once a day. Right now it's real time. Now it's like literally like within 30 minutes to 45 minutes, latency potentially. So the other part about this is you got to go back to thinking about what is the fundamental of how companies generate their revenue. How do PMSs generate their revenue, right? Making the statement that PMSs should absorb things is fine and good to say that. And a lot of PMSs have absorbed specifically like the big four channels, obviously, because they feel that's very valuable to try and, capitalize on that. And they will, lift their incremental SaaS business model per unit, per month or whatever, to incorporate a little bit of that. Or maybe they throw it in as extra, as just kind of like the way to get people to really commit and take that PMS on as a partnership. But a PMS's bread and butter is not channel management. They don't make their money from channel management. They make their money from the SaaS business model that they have for providing you a platform that allows you to manage your reservations, do your accounting and your financing for your business. And that's where their bread and butter is. And that's where they're going to build their roadmaps. They're going to prioritize all of their pieces to that. They're not going to prioritize a new API endpoint that Airbnb releases or Booking.com releases unless they can actually daisy chain off that to make additional money for themselves. And that's not to paint PMSs in a bad light, to say like they're greedy, they're just after money, whatever. We all are. Right? We are all after trying to make better for our businesses and do the right things for them. And enterprise clients, if there's anybody who's listening out there, you'll understand this pain too that I've experienced, which is PMSs are not designed for enterprise clients. They may say they are in some ways, but they are not fundamentally that way. There are pieces of your business that is not going to align with the main part of our industry, which the inventory in our business, in our industry, is SMB. It's anybody between 1 to 100 and 150 units in their company. If you get outside of that, you will start to, as you grow, experience strains and issues with, well, I really need this report to do this, or I really need this thing to do that. And the PMS is going to say, okay, we'll put that as a feature request. How many times have everybody heard feature request? And it's fine for them to do that. I'm not trying to hate on them, but it's them prioritizing their tech roadmaps for the business to be the most successful at generating the ROI on those efforts that apply not to just you, but to everybody else. So I definitely think that there is a little level of ignorance in the space when it comes to channel management or channel managers, in appreciating the fact that when you have one integration as an API to Airbnb, you have rates, you have availability, you have reservation input, you have reservation retrieval, you have photo input, you have content input. I mean, there are so many endpoints that are there, and they all have different time cadences. They all have different things that are parameters and things. And the OTAs are so big and have so much money and are so good at SEO to drive additional business and eyeballs to your business that they're not bending over to change their APIs for everybody, that needs something done. They are going to say, this is our API, you write to it and you figure it out. And that's literally it. And they do a QA check once you write your integration, make sure everything passes, everything's good, and then you're fine. And if any of those things go bad, they potentially can shut your stuff down and pause you if you don't comply, you don't do their updates and do their rights and stuff. And so, thinking of my experience at Rentals United, I know I'm biased, but I really do love those guys. My relationship with them started back at Stay Alfred days when we were small, and the channel managers in general had a flaw at the time, which is they wanted a piece of the pie, and so they wanted to do percentage of bookings. And there's still a few out there, which I won't call anybody out, but they still charge a percentage of every booking that gets passed through the system, which I think is wrong.
Yeah.
I think it should be a SaaS model. I think it should be flat fee, just like what Reynolds United does. And it's, whether you generate 5,000 reservations a month or you generate 2, you pay the same amount for that unit to be distributed. And Reynolds United does a great job too with that, because they have over 60 plus channels they're connected to. So it makes it easy for you to just go ahead and connect them all up, and you're not paying additional for each one other than what the channel might charge you on a commission. And you work that with them. But all that to say, it takes an enormous amount of staff, talent, grit, and intelligence to maintain API connections that PMSs are going to probably knock off the top 4. Guesty does a really good job, and they have more than that, and they go for it. But there are some layers to those where it's like, oh, well, some of these other channels we want a premium for because they're maybe more high maintenance, or they're a lot more touch points or more requirements or things they have to jump through that they have to justify doing that. And that's fine. But there are pieces that some PMSs are not going to write to those APIs that other channel managers will, that can give you valuable data to help your business. So hopefully that kind of answers, I think, reiterates what you and I talked about before, but gets to the head of it, I think, which is really understand that business is business for everybody, and they're always going to do what's the best interest of their revenue streams and their business to be successful. And PMSs are not channel managers, like, by nature. That's not what they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that will change though? Because I am curious. Do you think, I know you speak highly of Reynolds United, and this episode or podcast is not sponsored by Rentals United. FYI, everybody. I just kidding. Just had to pull that joke. But it's, I don't know. It just does seem to me, especially going through that tech landscape report, right? Like, I'm not a technical founder. I'm not a technical guy. Like, I couldn't tell you shit about how anything is built from code, APIs, anything like that. But I do understand, I think, a little bit of the ecosystem comparatively to most who either just got into the industry or maybe say they know product and tech, but they probably don't. No dig to anybody out there. But just in the sense of, I don't know, I feel like there's so many pieces. And I think, this is a big common theme that I've been seeing, because I play in both worlds, the traditional and VRMA world, and then the new up and coming Airbnb host world, right? With Level Up Your Listing conference versus short-term rental wealth conference versus, VRMA International, right? I'm in those kind of worlds and landscapes. And a lot of the people on both sides, to be frank, like, both sides don't come for traditional hotels or hospitality like you and I do. So when it comes to getting exposed to the technology landscape, it's overwhelming. You have a PMS, you have Airbnb, which people think is a PMS because that's usually where they start, at least now. And then you have, lock access control, you have noise sensors, you have revenue management, and you have channel connection, you have guest communication tools. Like, the list goes on, and just inundated with tech. And so now there's this whole new learning curve, especially with the booking engine, if you're doing book direct versus all these other things, right? Like, it's so much tech. And now traditional hotel guys like you and I, we come in and are like, oh, like, you don't have this? That's weird. That's like, oh, the one nice thing when I came from hotels to vacation rentals though was I don't have to run a night audit report. Thank God.
Oh my God. Closing the business every day? No, thank you.
It makes no sense. And anyway, so like, the tech landscape can be kind of complicated, and I don't want to ramble on and take too much, but in the sense of that's a lot for a new entrepreneur to learn, especially when you're just trying to execute good hospitality and good return for either investors or homeowners, right? Like, we all want to be profitable. We all want to like have that freedom life balance. Technology can sometimes play a role in taking away from that. And I would love to know your thoughts on the landscape of technology in our industry changing. Are we in the midst of a change? Do you think it's still going to be a while until we have some bigger players? As we talked, Guesty raised a $130 million Series F round, I think. Don't quote me on that, listeners. It's a high up there round, but $100 or $900 million valuation. Like, we've gotten a couple players now that are getting into this bigger ticket item, stock price if they ever go public. But I don't know. I'm just curious. Do you think it'll change, or do you think it's kind of broken in any shape or form, or is it supposed to work this way?
Yeah, I think a couple things. One, I will say this. As much as I do appreciate and love, the concept of channel managers, I will say that there has been a problem on the other side of the fence too, in terms of like PMSs and channel managers, that channel managers in a way have also thought like, you need me, like you need only me, like you need this kind of thing. And that's it. And I'm not saying everybody has been that way, but there definitely was a few that some are gone now, I think. But kind of played that card a little bit. And I think that was wrong. I think folks like Reynolds United, I think Booking Pal's done it. And I think even like, what was it? NextPax and a few others, like they started to break down the barriers between the PMSs and channel managers and say, hey, let's do an integration. Let's figure this out. Let's help you, because it's extremely complex. It's also a lot of investment. Every time you build another API connection, you have to not just say, okay, checkbox, back to my light switch thing. Like it's not a light switch. You just turn it on. There is somebody who needs to be maintaining that connection, maintaining that API, watching over it maintenance. And that costs money in terms of salary of qualified people who can actually do it, and everything there. So I think there's a little bit of a convergence that's going on in the space. I think that there is still some, I think Inhabit started it a while back, where they started consolidating a lot of software platforms, bridging in PMSs, even channel managers. I think they acquired Blue Tent, I think, during that time frame. And Blue Tent had a little bit of dabble in some distribution kind of channel management stuff. But I think what we will probably see more of is the potential of channel managers bridging even closer to some of the PMSs. And if, maybe there's some acquisitions, some mergers, something like that, that's probably the path that's quickest and most efficient. Because if you've got some channel managers who are just seasoned year after year experience of managing these APIs and stuff, why reinvent the wheel? Why would a PMS go and say, hey, I'm going to go build out all these other ancillary channels beyond the big four, when somebody's already done it, and maybe it would be less expensive for me to just do this and be able to bring on the right people to actually do it in a better swoop. So I think that is probably more likely the case. Will channel managers still exist by themselves? Sure. But I think there's going to be a lot more closeness to PMSs that will eventually happen. Or PMSs are going to have to or channel managers are going to have to reinvent themselves and actually build a PMS within their channel manager, and which has the opposite of what I said, which is that's not been their bread and butter. So that, like, why would you, prioritize and do every bell and whistle you can for a PMS function off of a channel manager as a base? Although fundamentally it sounds kind of cool actually to say start from the channel management part and then work into the PMS, but that's a lot of work.
Well, I do think, I don't know, I would be surprised if we didn't see some vertical integration happening within the kind of SaaS era tech landscape, in the sense of, I think more business. I think I might butcher this name, Yardi, like a data company is buying
the real estate.
They're buying WeWork. So it's like, okay, that's an interesting play, right? Like that's not anything in multifamily, but it is another way, because especially they're serving the B2B customer. And that B2B customer, what better way to do it than to have a B2B business like WeWork, where, that's kind of their bread and butter, and it makes sense in the vertical integration kind of perspective. I would be surprised. I don't know. You would think it would make sense, but obviously the money has to make sense too. Like it has to actually be a decent acquisition or merger. I'm very curious, just from your point of view too, in the dumbest down way possible. Like pretend I'm 5 and you're describing APIs to me, because I've tried describing it on the show before. I'm not the most accurate, but basically it's my term, or it's my way of saying what an API is to people is an API is a bridge communicator between softwares. Basically how they talk to each other. The way they talk to each other is just pulling and pushing data. And I would love to know your perspective on APIs, because I know a lot of our listeners are either 200 plus homes or units. They are tech people themselves. It's kind of a good mix. So I would love to just also bring that down to earth, so that way people that maybe not used to the API world, I almost said AI for a second. Gosh, I almost got away with it. But the API world, I just love to dumb that down for us real quick.
Yeah, I think you got it pretty darn on the spot. It's really it's a communication vehicle between different pieces of technology. So if I have my 2-bedroom, 2-bath in my system, Airbnb does not know what that means out of my system. So I have to join and translate basically all of my parameters inside of my platform where my 2-bedroom, 2-bath sits. I have to translate what each of those points mean to the available points that are inside of Airbnb's API to basically, I mean, it's like language translation to me is the way I feel like it is. It's literally saying this means this. And it takes specialized people to read those APIs to understand exactly what they are. I'll give everybody a very basic example, which would be reservation ID, right? In Guesty, for example, Guesty has confirmation codes, but then they also have reservation IDs. In Airbnb, they also have like confirmation codes / reservation IDs. So knowing which one equals which one, so that then successfully a booking can be written into Guesty's API or into Guesty in order to build that reservation in our system to be able to see it in a certain way, has to be accurate and has to be maintained and done well. I mean, not even just that, but also like in the schema of the API of those points, which would be like, is it a integer, or is it a, like what type of value it is? So connecting all those pieces is literally just saying this means this over here. And that's literally what it is. It's no different what you said. It just, to me, it just seems like it's a language translation between systems.
I like that. I'm definitely going to use that for future episodes. I'm curious because one of the other piece that we talked about in our pre-chat was connectivity, right? We have one dashboard for your PMS, one dashboard for your ops, platform, another login for your dynamic pricing or revenue management. You have all these logins, right? And it's such a fun day-to-day opportunity. If you're in operations and property management, don't you just love logging into all these channels or all these softwares? It's a great thing. But connectivity was a channel, or gosh, I'm getting all my words mixed up. Connectivity was a category on the tech landscape report from Aperto and Wheelhouse. And I found connectivity really interesting because it would be, in a perfect world, awesome to log into one account, have everything at the touch of my fingertips, from property management information to reservation data to field data for my team to then rates and availabilities, like all the things, right? It would be super sexy and awesome. But it's just not the case, right? Like it's just not how that is. And when we were talking before, you said you kind of see channel managers as the kind of connectivity umbrella or something that could really solve this issue. And I asked you kind of like the question of, okay, would there ever be like a master API? Let's say Airbnb, since that they're a $100 billion+ company, let's just say they come up and you're like, you know what? We're tired of building all these damn APIs with all these people and all these companies. Doesn't make sense. Here's the most perfect API you could ever have. Build off this. This is a new standard of API. Everyone should use this type of API. Is that even a possible thing? Or am I just kind of being the non-technical founder person that I am and just thinking like, oh, that's the problem solver right there. That'll solve all our issues. Let's just connect and make sure everything's perfect. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on the evolution of API and kind of channel management playing a role?
Yeah, I think, yes. Would it be amazing to have it? Yes, it totally would be. To be able to say, hey, there's one API that is like the conduit between all the other APIs and be able to save everybody that headache. The problem is that we're human that are creating these businesses and running these things. Yeah. Can it be done? Yeah. I mean, there is not anything in this world, in this day and age and technology, that can't be done. Like everything can be done. I think we're proving that as a society and as a as a planet. We're proving that we can do anything we put our minds to. The problem is that as humans, we have businesses and we have money that comes in and out of those businesses that takes care of success and everything else. And so even if you could get everybody on the same page to say, yep, this one API thing is there, people are going to want a piece of every bit of pie of the work and the effort to make money and to do things and have a business and all that stuff. So that in itself, I think, will always prevent that from becoming a reality. I don't think that any one business combined with everybody else's businesses are going to be able to align in a successful way to say this is one solution that solves for everybody. A very small granular close related example to that is cleaning fees. Everybody talks about wanting to have cleaning fees gone and removed. But the problem is that in order for it to actually be successful, you need every single property manager and every single supply out there to adopt that and say, we're not doing cleaning fees. Because otherwise, some people, as you've already seen in Airbnb, some people who have no cleaning fees might get, get better performance in search results of certain things, but other ones vice versa, may not get as good because of the fact that they don't have a cleaning fee, but they've baked it into the room rate, and the room rate is higher than the other room rates in the search results until people get to the checkout screen, and then they go, whoa, okay, it's about the same. But nobody's going that far in comparative analysis to actually do that when they're making their purchases. So all that to say, that's a small example related to the fact that I don't know that we could actually centralize one API to rule them all. The closest that we're going to get is probably channel managers like Rentals United. Again, love those guys. I'm not trying to plug them here, but they've they definitely figured some things out, which was they were one of the first to say, hey, let's start partnering with revenue management, RMS systems. Because RMS systems like Wheelhouse, they're not a PMS by nature, and they also don't have all the integrations to all the channels. And so it's kind of, again, back to that thing I've said before, whether you set it at $100 or $500, if you can't get it out there, it doesn't matter. So Wheelhouse integrated to Rentals United, and those clients that are on the Rentals United channel manager who don't necessarily want to go maintain an additional platform or start up a new integration with Wheelhouse to try and connect into this thing or that thing to go all these other places, people can actually go use it via Rentals United. Rentals United has tons of other pieces too beyond RMSs that are in there that they've broadened their horizon. So I'm not saying they are the end all be all solution, but that type of behavior is probably the closest that we're going to get, is where a channel manager maintaining all these API integrations for where people need to display to convert and get bookings for all the other support systems like PMSs, accounting systems, RMS systems, even CRM stuff, booking engine stuff, all that stuff can be sitting in those places for them to at least minimize the amount of logins and places they have to go. So I have to say it's inevitable, but as we've grown technology wise, people have to adopt and adapt, actually not adopt, but they have to adapt to it and actually start learning the things. Be efficient with your time, figure out how to get into the things, set up your single sign-on stuff, do things to make your life a little bit easier. But unfortunately, our human nature isn't going to allow us to universalize one API to connect them all.
Yeah. Let's say it's a good point. And, I could hear Andrew Kitchell in the previous episode already saying, and that limits innovation, right? If there's just one solution, that really limits innovation and shaking up things.
Stagnancy.
100%. And then everyone gets comfortable, and then we have another COVID, and then everything shifts or shakes and changes, right? It's an endless cycle. So it does make sense. I am curious. It sounds like a huge opportunity for channel managers to really expand beyond the core business of I put channels into PMSs or get your supplier product into marketplaces that get eyeballs and all that good stuff. Do you think the channel management category will eventually I know we kind of talked about maybe a channel management play that turns into a property management software, et cetera. But do you think there's a bigger role for channel managers in the industry?
I think there is if they choose to see it in the way that I think Rentals United has, which is don't just be content on being a channel manager. Think about what other things you can do with it. Can you build white label booking engines for people? Can you build white label channel management stuff for people? I mean, say you're a property management company that's growing and getting bigger, and you start acquiring other property management companies. Is there a white label solution that you can do to try and merge that? There's lots of other things there's also the, all the lock mechanisms and key code access and stuff like that, those systems, and universalizing those communication platforms, all kinds of stuff. Those are opportunities for the channel management community, I think, to do it, because what they've done successfully is navigate the language translation of the technology between lots and lots of systems. So if there are brains out there that people are looking for to help them, like those types of brains are the best ones you could have on your team because they've been there and seen it all and they know what's going on with those translations between APIs. I would say there's also another component to think about here too, as in terms of fundamentals of all these businesses. And I think I talked to you about it too before the show, but a really good friend of mine, his name is Gordy Dot, and he's the CIO at Kalispel Tribes here in the Pacific Northwest. And he was at Red Lion with me, and he was the head of tech there. And he had the small dev shop in the corporate office, and developers. And we all know, and for a lot of us in bigger corporations, like you'll have lots of different corporate folks be like, we should build an app. We should do this thing. We should create this kind of tech or do this thing. And he said it was really around the decision, the whole make versus buy decision. And I think that this fundamental goes to all of the businesses in the vacation rental space, which is, what do you do that makes your money, that makes your revenue? And for like, in that example with Gordy, he said he put up a big old huge banner in his office with all his developers, and it said, "We sell hotel rooms." And it was because it was a shiny distraction so many times when somebody's, you know what, we should build this app. We should build this thing from the ground up. We should do this thing. And it's like, well, we don't sell tech. We sell hotel rooms, and we are tech to support the selling of those hotel rooms, not selling that tech as a product. And so I think that's something that, in my opinion, a lot of the tech space in the vacation rental space side of it needs to think about in a lot of ways, which is like, what do you do the best and what do you sell the best? If you need to pivot, that's totally fine. Start up a sister company, do something else, but don't inherently change yourself and what you do because of a shiny distraction that says we should just build it. Maybe you should actually integrate or partner with somebody else or figure something that way. So,
yeah, gosh, open up a whole new can of worms too. I think we could go up another hour with this conversation because I originally, when I first started the show, all I really talked about was the guest experience, creating moments, hospitality. Like, this is the core bread and butter, which it still is today. Don't get me wrong. We definitely have pivoted the show to be more the business of hospitality, this type of conversation, going specialized versus generalized. But at the end of the day, like, you're kind of right in the sense of we are selling hotel rooms or we are selling homes, like, to stay in. It's not, if we're going to break it down to the basic core, yes, that's the basic. We're selling rooms, we're selling, stays. But then the other level of that is the execution of the in-stay, right? Making sure that you communicate it properly, post-booking, that the home is clean, that the this and that, like, that is part of we sell X, Y, and Z inventory. But I do think it is quite interesting because you kind of put a whole new point on the vertical integration topic, right? Where we've seen companies in our industry, from Kasai out in Latin America to, even Front Desk, who I'm a big fan of, Jesse DePinto and the whole team that was there. But, building your own tech is not the answer for vertical integration in that sense sometimes, because it does require a ton of upkeep, especially on code and being up to speed with all these connections like you talked about. So I don't know, like, building tech as an operating company, in my opinion, is just a really bad idea unless it's something super low key. I know, Cassiola out in Orlando, they've built some tech in-house, but it's more of a piece that they're not trying to sell. And two, it's just connecting their softwares to be a little bit more efficient and increase their profitability and time spent within the softwares rather than just, logging into a bunch of stuff and constantly tabbing over. So anyways, I don't know. It's such an interesting play.
Well, and I'll drop one very controversial bomb here too, which is like, and this goes back to my Stay Alfred days, and it probably led to some of the issues and things that we had in certain aspects before COVID took us down. But VCs, I think, are a lot to blame in so many of that way of what happened, and that's because the valuation, if you said you were tech enabled as a company, was like 4x on your valuation. If you said you were tech enabled or you were a technology type company, even though you did hospitality and you're selling vacations and selling vacation rentals and homes and stuff like that. And I will say this right now. I think the VCs really hurt the space because I don't think they understand the space very well. And I think that they also made it in a way that was like, well, you got to be tech enabled. So what's your tech stack? Like, what are you building? How many developers do you have? How many engineers? What kind of things are you challenging? And that kind of, in so many ways, not that anybody is dumb to think that's what I have to do and that's why they did it. It's more so like, it definitely put a carrot out there to say, hey, if you say you're tech enabled and you have some tech, you'll get 4x your valuation. And it's like, that's not great for the space and that's not great for everything. I mean, obviously you can see that a lot of the things that have been happening over the last several years, the shift in companies coming and going, so.
Yeah. Well,
sorry, a little controversial, but I had to drop that because
I was going to say, I love it because at the end of the day, I think I love venture capital. I'm a big capitalist in general. I listen to shows around startups and capitalism and, blah, blah, blah. But my thing, I think, too, is venture capitalists or venture capital funds even, and to get like more specific, they know technology. They do know that. It is not made for a human-intensive business.
Right.
And unfortunately, but fortunately, that's what makes hospitality stand out, is that we are human-intensive for that extra layer of care, creating moments, memories, the things that makes you feel good when you go to sleep at night. Not the, oh, Dan, did I get that checklist done or did I get this email sent? Like none of that stuff. So that's like, there's a reason why venture capital companies venture capital funds don't invest in mom and pop shops that don't have any software and they use off the shelf, payment processing and all this other stuff. It's human intensive. There's no return in the sense of a 10x, 100x. It is what it is.
100%. And I don't fully blame them for anything of what it is. I mean, there is a need for it. It's just the whole, like, don't push companies to be tech enabled in order to like make it happen. If it's a great company that provides amazing and tangible experiences, that has great expansion growth opportunities and things, don't interrupt that by saying you need to have tech. You need to have a tech shop. Like, don't do that.
And there goes all your money. I love it.
Yeah. Literally burn it.
Yeah, seriously, the burn. Man. Well, Doug, this is honestly, I think definitely need to have you back on. I try to keep the shows within an hour. If I didn't, I would be very much a Joe Rogan of like, hey, let's just talk for 3 hours and just publish it, just send it. But no, this is super fun for me. I've been really looking forward to it, and I know there's a lot more that we can geek out on. Sure. I want to put this out to you. Let's get a roundtable going. Let's get a revenue management, distribution, marketing roundtable, and get some experts around this conversation and dive in a little bit deeper together. That would be super fun. One question I like to ask people now, and I've kind of forgotten it on the last couple episodes, but if you had a chapter in a book, any chapter, let's just say I was writing a book from all my learnings of guests on the show, what would your title be for that chapter if you had to pick? It'd be anything and everything.
Wow. Probably I would say be graciously stubborn.
Be graciously stubborn. I like it.
Yeah. I think that would be the one I would say with.
Perfect. I love it. Yeah. And so for the listeners I wanted to connect with you more, I'm going to have everything linked in the show notes, but what's the one place you would want them to come to directly if they're interested in connecting and talking about some of the topics that we discussed today?
Yeah, I think it just hit me up on LinkedIn. I think that's probably the easiest way to do it. Keep it that way. That makes it simple.
Perfect. For all of you listeners, now you know where to go. There's going to be a link in the show notes with multiple other links. And of course, check out Romy, Doug Truitt, all things beyond this episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Doug, thank you so much for being on the show and allowing me to pick your brain a little bit. And thanks for dropping a couple bombs on us right before we wrapped up.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Of course. All right, Slick Talkers, you know the deal. Like and subscribe. All things Slick Talk, the Hospitality Podcast. We'll see you all again next week. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our show partners for making Slick Talk, the Hospitality Podcast, possible. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we would love to connect with you outside of the podcast.
So you can follow us on all of our social media channels for daily hospitality content, or find us on slicktalkthepodcast.com. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and we will see you guys all again next week.